Yo, real talk, have you ever smiled through the pain while your whole world was falling apart? Like, you're out here being everyone's rock, but inside you're straight up crumbling? That's Sakura Haruno in a nutshell, fam. And if you clicked on this video, chances are you felt that same vibe, being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who's always got it together even when you're bleeding out emotionally. Here's the thing though, Sakura isn't just some anime character with pink hair and healing powers. She's literally a walking, talking representation of what psychologists call the caregiver's paradox. The brutal reality that the people who heal everyone else are often the ones suffering in silence. And dude, if you've ever been the friend who listens to everyone's problems but never shares your own, or if you've ever put on a brave face when you were dying inside, this is gonna hit different. Because what Sakura went through in Naruto, it's not just fiction, it's the psychological breakdown that happens when you give everything to everyone and leave nothing for yourself. Stick around because we're about to dive deep into why Sakura's story is actually your story, and why understanding her psychology might just save you from the same silent collapse she went through. Hey, before we go deeper into this, if you're vibing with this content and you want to understand more about the psychology behind your favorite anime characters, do me a solid and smash that subscribe button real quick. Here's why you don't want to miss out. We're building a community of people who get it, who understand that anime isn't just entertainment, it's literally a mirror to our own struggles, our own healing, our own growth. Every video on this channel breaks down the real psychology behind these stories, and honestly, if Sakura's silent suffering resonates with you, then you need to see what we're uncovering about other characters too. Plus, hitting that like button tells YouTube to show this to more people who need to hear it. People who are out here healing everyone but themselves. So go ahead, subscribe, drop a like, and let's keep this convo going. Trust me, you're gonna want to stick around for what's coming next. Alright, let's get into it. So check it. From the jump, Sakura's whole identity was built on one thing, being needed. And that's where the psychology gets wild, because this girl didn't just want to be useful, she needed to be needed. That's a whole different beast. When you look at her early days in the series, she's constantly trying to prove herself, constantly comparing herself to Naruto and Sasuke, constantly feeling like she's not enough. And what does she do with that feeling? She transforms it into this obsessive need to be the person who saves everyone else. Classic compensation mechanism, fam. In psychology, we call this external validation dependency, when your entire sense of self-worth is tied to how much you can do for other people. It's like you're running on empty, but you keep pouring from a cup that's already bone dry because stopping would mean facing the fact that maybe, just maybe, you don't know who you are without being useful to someone else. Now here's where it gets real heavy. Sakura becomes a medical ninja, right? She literally chooses a path where her entire purpose is to heal other people's wounds. But think about the symbolism here for a second. She's closing up everyone else's injuries while her own emotional wounds are straight up gaping open. That's not just a career choice, that's a psychological defense mechanism called reaction formation. Basically, you deal with your own pain by obsessively focusing on fixing everyone else's pain. It's like if you're drowning, but instead of swimming to the surface, you're diving deeper to save other people who are drowning too. You feel me? And the craziest part is that society totally rewards this behavior. We love the selfless healer, the person who sacrifices everything for others. We put them on a pedestal and call them heroes. But nobody stops to ask, yo, who's healing the healer? Who's checking in on the person who's always checking in on everyone else? Let's talk about her relationship with Sasuke for a minute, because this is where you really see the psychological pattern playing out. Sakura's love for Sasuke isn't just romantic, it's pathological. And I don't mean that in a judgy way, I mean it in a clinical sense. She attaches her entire emotional well-being to someone who repeatedly shows her that he doesn't value her the same way. He leaves, he pushes her away, he literally tries to kill her at one point, and yet she keeps coming back. What? Because in her mind, if she can just heal him, if she can just save him, if she can just be enough for him, then maybe she'll finally be enough for herself. That's called codependency, and it's one of the most damaging psychological patterns out there. You're basically saying, I'll set myself on fire to keep you warm and I'll call it love. You're putting someone else's emotional needs so far above your own that you lose touch with what you actually need, what you actually feel, what you actually deserve. But here's the thing that really messes people up. Sakura is good at what she does. Like really good. She becomes one of the most skilled medical ninjas in the entire shinobi world. She saves countless lives. She's objectively valuable, objectively talented, objectively strong. So from the outside looking in, it seems like she's got it all figured out. She's successful, she's respected, she's powerful. But success doesn't equal healing, fam. You can be at the top of your game and still be broken inside. You can have everyone else thinking you're doing amazing while you're barely holding it together. That's the illusion of functionality, when you're so good at performing strength that nobody notices you're actually suffering. And the more you perform it, the harder it becomes to let that mask slip because now you've got this reputation to maintain. Now people expect you to be the strong one, the reliable one, the one who never breaks. So you keep pushing, keep performing, keep pretending until one day you realize you don't even know where the performance ends and the real you begins. There's this concept in psychology called compassion fatigue, and it's specifically about people in caregiving roles. Doctors, nurses, therapists, social workers, and yeah, medical ninjas who spend every day healing traumatized war victims. It's when you give so much emotional energy to caring for others that you literally run out of empathy, not just for them but for yourself. Your nervous system gets stuck in this state of constant stress response because you're always in crisis mode, always responding to someone else's emergency, always prioritizing someone else's survival over your own well-being. And eventually, your body and mind just tap out. You become numb, detached, exhausted in a way that sleep can't fix. But here's the twisted part. People with compassion fatigue often don't stop working. They keep going because stopping would mean admitting they're struggling, and admitting they're struggling would mean they're not the strong, capable person everyone thinks they are. So they keep bleeding internally while maintaining that external image of having it all together. Now let's connect this back to you because I know you didn't click on this video just to hear about a fictional character. If you've ever been the friend who everyone calls when they're in crisis but nobody checks on when you're going through it, you know exactly what Sakura's dealing with. If you've ever smiled through your own pain because you didn't want to burden anyone else with your problems, you're living this pattern. If you've ever felt like your value as a person is directly tied to how much you can do for other people, you're caught in the same psychological trap. And the scariest part? You probably don't even realize you're doing it because it's been normalized. We live in a culture that glorifies self-sacrifice, that tells us real strength means never asking for help, that teaches us to earn love through usefulness rather than just existing and being worthy of love simply because we're human. Sakura's story is a mirror, and what you see in that mirror depends on how honest you're willing to be with yourself. Are you the person who gives endlessly but never receives? Are you the person who fixes everyone else's problems while ignoring your own? Are you the person who's so afraid of being seen as weak or needy that you've convinced yourself you don't actually need anything from anyone? Because if that's you, then you need to understand something crucial. What you're doing isn't strength, it's survival mode masquerading as strength. Real strength isn't about never needing help, it's about being brave enough to admit when you do. Real healing isn't about closing everyone else's wounds while yours stay open. It's about recognizing that you can't pour from an empty cup, and that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Sakura spent years learning this the hard way, and the psychological damage she accumulated along the way is exactly what we're about to unpack in the next layer. Because understanding how she got here is one thing, but understanding what it cost her? That's where this story really breaks you open. So now we gotta talk about what happens when you live like this for too long, when you spend years being the healer, the strong one, the person everyone leans on while you're literally crumbling from the inside out. Because here's what nobody tells you about the caregiver role. It doesn't just drain you, it fundamentally rewires how you process emotions, how you relate to yourself, and how you experience the world. Sakura's internal collapse isn't this dramatic, visible breakdown where she suddenly falls apart in front of everyone. Nah, it's way more insidious than that. It's the slow erosion of self that happens so gradually you don't even notice until you're already gone. And that's the really terrifying part. By the time you realize what's happening, you've already lost yourself. Let's break down what this looks like psychologically. First up, there's something called identity diffusion, and it's basically when your sense of self becomes so wrapped up in what you do for others that you stop knowing who you are separate from that role. Sakura isn't just a medical ninja, she is the act of healing. She isn't just someone who cares about people, she is the act of caring. Remove those functions and what's left? That's the question she can't answer, and trust me, that's a terrifying place to be. It's like if you spent your whole life being defined by your job, your relationships, your usefulness to others, and then one day someone asks you, okay, but who are you when you're not doing any of that? And you just blank. You got nothing. Because you've been so busy being everything to everyone else that you forgot to actually be someone to yourself. Now here's where the psychology gets really dark. When you lose your sense of self like this, you start experiencing what's called emotional dysregulation. Basically, your ability to process and manage your own emotions gets completely jacked up because you've spent so long suppressing them in order to be available for everyone else. Sakura can't afford to fall apart when someone needs her, so she pushes down her fear, her anger, her sadness, her frustration. All of it gets shoved into this internal pressure cooker that just keeps building and building with no release valve. And what happens to a pressure cooker with no release? Eventually, it explodes. But here's the thing, when people like Sakura finally break, it's not always loud or visible. Sometimes the explosion happens entirely internally. You have panic attacks, you hide in bathroom stalls. You cry yourself to sleep but wake up with a smile. You feel this screaming void inside you, but you keep showing up, keep performing, keep pretending everything's fine because you literally don't know how to do anything else. There's also this phenomenon called learned helplessness that starts to set in, and it's wild because it seems contradictory at first. How can someone who's constantly helping others feel helpless? But that's exactly what happens. When you spend all your energy solving everyone else's problems, you start to believe that your own problems are unsolvable. You become so conditioned to putting yourself last that when you finally do need help, you don't even know how to ask for it. You've convinced yourself that you don't deserve support, that you should be able to handle everything on your own, that needing help makes you weak or burdensome. So you just don't. You suffer in silence, and that silence becomes its own kind of prison. Sakura does this constantly throughout the series. She takes on massive emotional weight, processes trauma alone, deals with rejection and loss and betrayal without ever really letting anyone in to help her carry it. And that's not strength, that's self-abandonment disguised as strength. Let's talk about the war arc for a second, because this is where you really see the cracks starting to show. Sakura is out there on the battlefield, healing soldiers left and right, literally keeping people alive through sheer force of will and chakra control. She's performing medical miracles, she's saving lives, she's being the hero everyone needs her to be. But pay attention to what's happening beneath the surface. She's watching people die despite her best efforts. She's feeling the weight of every life she couldn't save. She's pushing her body past its limits to the point where she's physically and emotionally depleted. And yet she keeps going because stopping isn't an option in her mind. This is what burnout looks like, fam. It's not just being tired, it's a complete depletion of your physical, emotional, and psychological resources to the point where you're running on fumes and willpower alone. Your body is screaming at you to stop, your mind is fracturing under the pressure, but you keep pushing because you've tied your entire sense of worth to your ability to keep going. Here's something that's gonna hit hard if you relate to this. Burnout fundamentally changes your brain chemistry. When you're in chronic stress mode for extended periods, your cortisol levels stay elevated, your nervous system gets stuck in fight or flight, and your brain literally starts to shrink in areas responsible for emotional regulation and memory. You become more irritable, more anxious, more depressed. You lose the ability to feel joy or satisfaction even when you accomplish something amazing. That's called anhedonia, and it's your brain's way of saying, "Yo, we're done, we can't keep doing this." But people like Sakura don't listen to those signals because they've been conditioned to override them. They've learned to function while broken, to smile through the pain, to keep serving even when there's nothing left to give. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough: vicarious trauma. This is when you absorb the trauma of the people you're trying to help. As a medical ninja, Sakura doesn't just heal physical wounds, she's constantly exposed to the psychological aftermath of violence, loss, and suffering. She hears people's stories, sees their pain, carries their grief. And because she's empathetic, because she genuinely cares, that trauma doesn't just pass through her, it sticks. It accumulates. Every patient she couldn't save, every friend who got hurt, every moment of helplessness she witnessed, all of that gets stored in her nervous system like emotional scar tissue. And over time, it becomes harder and harder to separate her own pain from everyone else's pain. She starts to carry trauma that isn't even hers, and that weight becomes unbearable. But here's the really messed up part: nobody sees this happening. To the outside world, Sakura is thriving. She's strong, capable, successful. She's out here being a literal lifesaver, and people admire her for it. They don't see the internal collapse because she's gotten so good at hiding it. This is what psychologists call high-functioning depression, or high-functioning anxiety. When you're able to maintain your external responsibilities and achievements while internally you're barely surviving. You go to work, you take care of others, you accomplish your goals, but inside you feel hollow, exhausted, disconnected from yourself and the world around you. You're like a building with a beautiful facade, but the foundation is crumbling, and nobody knows because you're too skilled at keeping up appearances. The relationship with Sasuke becomes even more psychologically damaging in this context because it's not just about unrequited love. It's about the fact that she keeps seeking validation from someone who can't give it to her, and every rejection reinforces her belief that she's not enough. This creates what's called a trauma bond, where the intermittent reinforcement of hope and rejection keeps you psychologically hooked even though the relationship is destroying you. It's like gambling. You keep playing because occasionally you win just enough to believe the next time might be different, but the house always wins in the end. Sakura's devotion to Sasuke isn't just romantic dedication. It's a psychological pattern where she's trying to heal her own wounds by fixing someone who's broken, as if saving him will somehow prove that she's worthy of being saved too. But that's not how it works. You can't heal yourself through someone else's healing. You can't earn your own love by giving all your love away. Yo, hold up real quick. I gotta know, what are you thinking right now? Like, is this hitting home for you? Drop a comment below and let me know. Have you ever felt like Sakura? Have you ever been the person everyone leans on while you're falling apart inside? Or maybe you know someone going through this right now? Someone who's always strong for everyone else but never lets anyone be strong for them. Tell me your story in the comments, fam. I read every single one, and honestly, your experiences help other people realize they're not alone in this. Plus, when you comment, it helps YouTube show this video to more people who need to hear it. So don't be shy, share what's on your mind. Are you the healer who needs healing? Have you been carrying weight that isn't yours to carry? Let's talk about it. And yo, stick with me till the end because what comes next is gonna completely shift how you see this whole situation. We're about to hit the point of no return, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Alright, here's where things get really real, and I need you to pay close attention because this is the part that most people miss when they watch Naruto. There's this moment, actually it's more like a series of moments, where Sakura crosses a psychological threshold that you can't come back from. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, and most viewers don't even catch it because it happens in the silence between the action scenes. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is the point of no return, and it's the moment when the person who's been holding everyone together finally realizes that nobody's holding them together. And that realization? That's when everything changes. Let's talk about the moment Sasuke tries to kill her. Not just threaten her, not just push her away, actually attempts to end her life. And here's what's so psychologically devastating about this scene. Sakura's response isn't anger, it's not self-preservation, it's not even shock. It's this heartbreaking acceptance. She's been so conditioned to minimize her own pain, to excuse the behavior of the person she loves, to take responsibility for things that aren't her fault, that even when someone literally tries to murder her, part of her still thinks maybe she deserved it. Maybe she wasn't good enough. Maybe if she had just been stronger, better, more useful, this wouldn't have happened. That's not love, fam. That's what happens when you've been psychologically trained to accept crumbs and call it a feast. That's what happens when your self-worth has been so eroded that you can't even recognize when someone is fundamentally violating your right to exist safely in the world. This is what psychologists call betrayal trauma, and it's one of the most damaging forms of psychological injury because it doesn't just hurt, it fundamentally breaks your ability to trust. When someone you love, someone you've devoted yourself to, someone you've sacrificed everything for turns around and tries to destroy you, it shatters your entire understanding of relationships, of love, of what you deserve. And the crazy part is that Sakura still doesn't walk away. She still holds on to this idea that maybe, somehow, she can fix this. That's the point of no return right there, when you're so deep in the pattern that even attempted murder isn't enough to make you realize you need to save yourself instead of trying to save someone else. But here's where it gets even darker, and this is the part that's gonna wreck you if you really think about it. Sakura isn't just dealing with betrayal from Sasuke. She's dealing with the slow realization that the entire system she's been operating in is broken. The shinobi world, the village, the whole structure she's been serving. It's all built on this foundation of self-sacrifice that glorifies suffering and calls it duty. She's been conditioned from childhood to believe that her value lies in how much pain she can endure, how much she can give without asking for anything back, how well she can function while broken. And once you see that pattern, once you realize that the system itself is designed to exploit your willingness to sacrifice yourself, you can't just unsee it. That's the cognitive dissonance that tears people apart. When you've built your entire identity around a belief system that you suddenly realize is fundamentally toxic, but you're in so deep that leaving would mean losing everything you've worked for, everything you are. Let's talk about what this does to a person's sense of agency. Agency is your ability to make choices, to direct your own life, to feel like you have control over your own destiny. Sakura spends so much of her life reacting to other people's needs, other people's crises, other people's pain that she loses touch with her own agency. She becomes so externally focused that she stops knowing what she actually wants for herself. And when you lose your agency like that, when you become purely reactive instead of proactive about your own life, you start to feel like you're trapped. Like you're watching your life happen to you instead of living it. That's what the point of no return feels like psychologically. It's when you realize you've been sleepwalking through your own existence, performing a role instead of living authentically, and you don't even know how to wake up anymore. Now here's something that's gonna hit different if you've ever been in this position. There's a specific type of grief that comes with this realization, and it's not grief over losing someone else. It's grief over losing yourself. Sakura has to mourn the version of herself that believed love meant endless sacrifice. She has to mourn the innocence of thinking that if she just tried hard enough, gave enough, loved enough, everything would work out. She has to mourn the years she spent prioritizing everyone else while abandoning herself. And that grief is brutal because it comes with this crushing weight of regret and self-blame. You start asking yourself, how did I let this happen? Why didn't I see it sooner? Why wasn't I enough to save myself the way I saved everyone else? But those questions are a trap, fam, because they keep you stuck in the same pattern of self-blame that got you here in the first place. Here's what nobody tells you about the point of no return. It's actually the beginning of something, not just the end. Yeah, it's the death of who you used to be, the death of the illusions you've been carrying, the death of the patterns that kept you trapped. But it's also the first moment where real change becomes possible. Because you can't heal what you don't acknowledge, and you can't change a pattern you can't see. Sakura reaching this point, this rock-bottom realization that she's been bleeding herself dry for people who can't or won't reciprocate, that's actually the most important moment of her entire character arc. Not because it's triumphant, but because it's honest. It's the first time she's forced to confront the reality of her situation without the defense mechanisms, without the excuses, without the performance of being okay when she's not. But here's the really complicated part that messes people up. Even when you reach this point of no return, even when you can see the pattern clearly, breaking free from it is incredibly hard. Because the pattern isn't just external, it's internal. It's wired into your nervous system, embedded in your self-concept, reinforced by years of repetition. Sakura knows intellectually that she needs to change, but emotionally she's still caught in the same loops. She still feels responsible for Sasuke's well-being. She still feels guilty when she prioritizes her own needs. She still feels like her value is tied to how much she can give. That's the insidious thing about psychological patterns. Knowing they're there doesn't automatically make them go away. It's like knowing you have a bad habit doesn't magically stop you from doing it. You have to actively, consciously, repeatedly choose different, and that process is exhausting and uncomfortable and feels wrong even when you know it's right. Let's talk about what psychologists call the extinction burst. When you start changing a deeply ingrained pattern, things often get worse before they get better. Your brain freaks out because you're disrupting something familiar, even if that familiar thing was toxic. So you might feel more anxious, more guilty, more uncomfortable than you did when you were just going along with the pattern. Sakura experiences this too. The moments where she tries to assert boundaries or prioritize herself, she feels this overwhelming guilt and discomfort. Her brain is screaming at her that she's being selfish, that she's letting people down, that she's not being the person everyone needs her to be. And that's the point where most people give up and fall back into the old pattern because the discomfort of change feels worse than the familiar pain of staying stuck. But here's what makes this the turning point. Sakura starts to recognize that the discomfort of change, as brutal as it is at least moving her toward something different. The pain of staying the same, of continuing to bleed herself dry, of living in this state of constant self-abandonment, that pain doesn't lead anywhere. It just loops infinitely. So she's faced with this choice that isn't really a choice. Keep doing what you've always done and slowly destroy yourself, or step into the unknown discomfort of actually choosing yourself for once, even though you don't know how to do it yet, even though it feels foreign and wrong and terrifying. That's the point of no return. It's when staying the same becomes more unbearable than the fear of change. And if you're watching this and you're recognizing yourself in Sakura's story, this is your moment too. This is where you have to ask yourself, am I gonna keep playing this role until there's nothing left of me? Am I gonna keep giving to people who take without reciprocating? Am I gonna keep hiding my pain behind a smile and calling it strength? Or am I gonna finally choose myself, even though it's scary, even though people might not like it, even though I don't even know who I am without this pattern? Because here's the truth, the point of no return isn't about other people changing. It's about you deciding that you matter enough to stop waiting for permission to take care of yourself. It's about recognizing that saving everyone else while losing yourself isn't noble, it's self-destruction dressed up as virtue. And it's about understanding that the only person who can pull you out of this pattern is you. Sakura's journey doesn't end here, and honestly, neither does yours if you're living this pattern. The point of no return isn't the resolution, it's the recognition. It's the moment you stop lying to yourself about what's really happening. It's when you finally see the cage you've been living in, even if you don't know how to open the door yet. And that recognition, as painful as it is the most powerful thing that can happen to you. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know, you can't unknow it. And that awareness, that brutal, uncomfortable, devastating awareness, is the beginning of every real transformation that's ever happened. The question is, what are you gonna do with it? So here we are at the end, but real talk, this isn't actually an ending, is it? Because the thing about Sakura's story, the thing about your story if you're living this pattern, is that there's no clean resolution. There's no moment where everything suddenly makes sense and all the pain disappears and you ride off into the sunset completely healed and whole. That's not how psychological trauma works. That's not how breaking lifelong patterns works. And honestly, anyone who tells you there's a quick fix or a simple solution to this kind of deep-rooted psychological damage is straight up lying to you. What we're dealing with here is a scar that doesn't close, and maybe, just maybe, that's not actually a bad thing. Let me explain what I mean by that because this is crucial. Scars are interesting from a psychological perspective. They're not the original wound, the wound has technically healed. But the scar remains as evidence that the wound existed, that something happened, that you survived something that could have destroyed you. Sakura's psychological scars from years of self-abandonment, from loving someone who couldn't love her back, from bleeding herself dry for a world that kept taking. Those scars don't just disappear. They're part of her now. They've fundamentally changed who she is, how she sees the world, how she relates to herself and others. And you know what? That's not weakness. That's not failure. That's what survival looks like when you've been through hell and came out the other side still breathing. But here's where it gets complicated, and this is the part that most people don't understand about healing from this kind of trauma. Having scars doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're marked by your experiences, and those marks tell a story. The question isn't whether you have scars. If you've lived this pattern, you do, period. The question is, what story are your scars telling? Are they telling a story of someone who stayed stuck in the same destructive pattern forever? Or are they telling a story of someone who recognized what was happening and made the brutally difficult choice to break free, even though it hurt like hell, even though they didn't know how, even though they were terrified? Sakura's scars tell the story of someone who gave everything and had to learn the hard way that you can't heal the world if you're not willing to heal yourself first. She had to learn that being strong doesn't mean never breaking. It means breaking and then making the conscious choice to put yourself back together differently. She had to learn that the people who truly love you don't need you to be perfect or endlessly useful or always available. They need you to be real, to be honest, to be human. And that lesson? That came at a price. The scar is the receipt for that price, proof that the lesson cost something, that the transformation wasn't free. Now let's talk about what this means for you, because I know you didn't stick around this long just to hear about a fictional character. If you recognize yourself in Sakura's story, if you're the person who heals everyone while bleeding internally, if you're carrying the weight of being everyone's rock while your own foundation crumbles, you need to understand something fundamental. Your scars don't define you, but they are part of your story. The years you spent sacrificing yourself, the relationships where you gave more than you received, the moments you smiled through unbearable pain, those experiences changed you. And yeah, some of those changes hurt. Some of them left marks that won't ever fully fade. But some of those changes also made you stronger, more empathetic, more aware of what you will and won't accept in your life moving forward. Here's the thing about scars that don't close: they're sensitive. They ache sometimes, especially when the weather changes, when something reminds you of how you got them. Sakura can't just forget what she went through. She can't unhear Sasuke's rejection, can't unsee the way she abandoned herself for years, can't unfeel the exhaustion of carrying everyone's pain but her own. Those memories live in her body, in her nervous system, in the way she responds to certain situations. And the same is true for you if you've lived this pattern. You might heal, you might grow, you might break free from the cycle, but you'll still have moments where something triggers that old wound and suddenly you're back there, feeling all of it again. That's not regression, that's just how trauma works. It doesn't mean you haven't healed, it just means healing isn't linear and scars are permanent reminders of what you survived. But here's where the psychology gets really interesting. There's this concept called post-traumatic growth, and it's basically the idea that sometimes trauma, as devastating as it is, can actually lead to positive psychological changes. Not because the trauma was good, trauma is never good, but because the process of surviving it and making sense of it can lead you to develop new strengths, deeper self-awareness, stronger values, more meaningful relationships. Sakura's journey through this caregiver's paradox, through this pattern of self-abandonment and codependency, it breaks her down, yeah. But in breaking down, she has the opportunity to rebuild herself differently. To rebuild with stronger boundaries, with a clearer sense of self, with the understanding that her value isn't tied to how much she can do for others. The catch is that post-traumatic growth isn't automatic. You don't just go through trauma and magically come out better on the other side. It requires conscious effort, self-reflection, a willingness to sit with the discomfort of change and actually do the work. Sakura has to actively choose to break her patterns. She has to actively choose to prioritize her own healing. She has to actively choose to stop waiting for external validation and start validating herself. And that work? It's hard. It's uncomfortable. It requires her to face parts of herself she's been avoiding for years. But that's where the growth happens. Not in the trauma itself, but in what you choose to do with it afterward. And here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to hear but everyone needs to understand: you can't do this work for someone else. If you're watching this video hoping to figure out how to fix someone you love who's stuck in this pattern, I gotta be real with you. You can't. You can support them, you can show up for them, you can hold space for their healing, but you cannot do the healing for them. That's the hardest lesson Sakura's story teaches us. All those years she spent trying to heal Sasuke, trying to save him from himself, trying to love him into wholeness, it didn't work because that's not how healing works. Each person has to choose their own healing. Each person has to do their own work. You can't carry someone else's burden indefinitely without destroying yourself in the process. So where does this leave Sakura? Where does this leave you if you're living her story? Honestly, it leaves you at a crossroads. One path is familiar. Keep doing what you've always done, keep sacrificing yourself, keep hoping that one day all that giving will be reciprocated, keep bleeding internally while maintaining that external image of strength. That path is comfortable in its familiarity, even though it's slowly killing you. The other path is unknown. Start prioritizing yourself, start setting boundaries, start saying no, start asking for what you need, start choosing yourself even when it feels selfish or wrong or uncomfortable. That path is terrifying because you don't know where it leads, but at least it leads somewhere different. The scar that doesn't close is a reminder that you've been down the first path, and you know exactly where it goes. It goes to exhaustion, to burnout, to losing yourself in service of everyone else. The scar is proof that staying on that path costs you everything. So the question isn't whether the scar will close. It won't, and that's okay. The question is, are you gonna let that scar keep you trapped in the same pattern, or are you gonna let it be the reminder of what you survived and the motivation to choose differently moving forward? Sakura's story doesn't have a fairy tale ending because real psychological healing doesn't work that way. She doesn't suddenly become completely healed and whole. She doesn't magically stop caring about Sasuke or stop feeling the pull of those old patterns. What she does, or at least what she has the potential to do, is learn to live with her scars while choosing herself anyway. She learns that healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about integrating it into who you are now. She learns that strength isn't about never needing help, it's about being brave enough to ask for it. She learns that her value isn't contingent on how much she gives, but inherent in who she is. And if you're watching this right now and seeing yourself in every word I've said, then you already know what you need to do. You need to stop waiting for permission to take care of yourself. You need to stop believing that your worth is tied to your usefulness. You need to stop carrying weight that was never yours to carry in the first place. Your scar might not close, but you can stop picking at it. You can stop reopening the same wound over and over by repeating the same patterns. You can acknowledge the pain, honor what you survived, and then make the conscious choice to move forward differently. The scar that doesn't close is your reminder. It's your proof that you've been through something that could have destroyed you but didn't. And that matters. That means something. You're still here, still breathing, still capable of choosing differently even though it's hard. Sakura's story is unfinished because healing is unfinished. It's ongoing. It's a daily choice, not a destination. And your story? It's unfinished too. Which means you still get to decide how it goes from here. Yo, if this video hit you in a way you weren't expecting, if you're sitting there right now feeling seen and understood and maybe a little called out, good. That means you're paying attention. But here's the thing. Sakura's story is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle about the psychology behind the characters we love and the patterns we recognize in ourselves. If you found yourself in Sakura's silent suffering, then you need to check out our breakdown on Itachi, because his story is about what happens when you carry guilt that isn't yours and sacrifice your entire existence for a greater good that nobody even knows about. Or if you want to understand the flip side of codependency, we've got a deep dive on Kakashi and how avoidant attachment destroys your ability to connect even when you desperately want to. And dude, if you really want to understand how childhood trauma shapes everything about who you become, you gotta watch our analysis on Gaara. That one's gonna wreck you in the best way possible. Look, the psychology of anime isn't just entertainment. It's a mirror that shows us parts of ourselves we've been avoiding, and understanding these characters helps us understand our own patterns, our own pain, our own potential for growth. So don't let this be the last video you watch. Click on one of those suggestions. Keep this journey going because the more you understand about these psychological patterns, the more power you have to break free from them. And trust me, you deserve that freedom. You deserve to heal. You deserve to be more than the person who takes care of everyone else while forgetting to take care of themselves. So hit that next video, keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep choosing yourself. I'll see you in the next one, fam.